Hey everybody out there, welcome to my talk on what the dictionary teaches us about abortion. I know that may sound ridiculous. What does that have to do with anything for this conversation? But I hope in the course of me talking about it, you'll understand a little bit of what I'm saying. And I just want to say welcome to everybody here who's listening, that no matter where you stand on the issue of abortion, whether you're strongly pro-choice, whether you're strongly pro-life, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle, maybe there's something each of you can learn from this conversation and take away from it. And look, as I'm talking, feel free to make comments down below on the video, and I'll do my best to respond as you put them up there. I'll catch up with it later as well. But let's get started. For those of you who are listening today that may be pro-life, I hope today that these words that I'm sharing with you can be a little bit more helpful for you in terms of becoming a more compelling and persuasive pro-life person out there. You know, it's important that we all get into conversations with other people about abortion. It's so important. We can't let this be in the darkness. We have to shed light on this, and you have that ability to help save lives. Remember, there's almost 1 million abortions a year in America, so you can be someone who can influence others to choose life and to say yes, and you can be there to help that mother in the moment of need as well. It's important that we all be compassionate when talking with other people about abortion. You know, we're not going to be shoving our message down people's throat or anything like that. We want to listen. We want to have good conversations, right? We value the life of the unborn child, but we also value the life of the mother, and we value the other person on the other end of the conversation as well, right? Their life matters as well, and we need to be sharing with them and respecting them in our conversation. We want to respect all humans from beginning to end, and that includes the person we're talking to. To those of you who may disagree with me today, that's all right. I hope you learned something maybe, and just look, in the end, I just ask you to be open to what I have to say, and if you don't buy it, move on. No worries, no harm, no foul, but certainly would love for you to be open to what I have to say. I want to say that before I start, I want to acknowledge two main sources of information that have inspired myself and Louisiana Right to Life, our whole organization, and really how we speak and articulate on the issue of abortion in an intellectual way. And that really is two sources. First, the organization Stand to Reason, their program called Making Abortion Unthinkable is an excellent resource. You can Google Stand to Reason, Making Abortion Unthinkable. You can check out their program. It's really great to help you go deeper in how to be a persuasive pro-life advocate. I also want to shout out to the Equal Rights Institute and for their program Equipped for Life, that really is now more of a modern perspective, but really, again, a great resource for each of you to learn more about how to speak effectively to answer any question that is brought to you about the issue of abortion. So check out Stand to Reason and the Equal Rights Institute. All right, well, let's get started. So again, my topic today is, what does the dictionary teach us about abortion? And you know, I looked around my home and my office for actually a physical dictionary to use as a prop, and I couldn't find one. So I'm sure that just tells us a little bit about the modern age that we're in today. But whether you're on your phone or your computer, you can look up, go to Merriam-Webster, right, m-dw.com, and type in abortion and see what the definition is for Merriam-Webster. Okay, Merriam-Webster tells us that the definition of abortion is the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. Again, the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. Now, they have some subsets or some subsections under that main definition that talk about different types of abortion. They mention spontaneous abortion, right, which we would call a miscarriage. So that is certainly an important thing to talk about. But today we're going to leave that aside. We certainly are sympathetic to those who have suffered from miscarriage. This is to no fault of anybody that miscarriages happen. And so it's spontaneous. And we're going to separate that out against what would be an induced abortion, right? Which is something that is brought about. The induced abortion is someone begins it. It's an elective procedure where somebody decides to induce the abortion, right? So it doesn't just happen spontaneously like a miscarriage. It happens through an induced manner. So induced abortion, which is what is happening today in abortion facilities across America, right? Almost 1 million times a year in America, induced abortions are happening. All right. Now, one thing I also want to do is just try to simplify the definition for the purposes of our conversation. The termination of a pregnancy resulting in the death of the embryo or fetus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove accompanied by, closely followed by, and I'm just going to go with the termination of a pregnancy resulting in the death of the embryo or fetus. I think that's a good place for us to start and us to discuss this topic as we move on here. Okay, so what do we learn from the dictionary definition of abortion, right? How could this make an impact on our conversation? Well, we first see right away that the dictionary is telling us that something dies in an abortion. Yeah, that sounds like common sense, right? But the dictionary, of all places, is telling us that in every abortion, something dies, right? Again, the termination of a pregnancy resulting in the death of the embryo or the fetus. So this is, for many of us, again, this is common sense, right? But in the national conversation about abortion, both whether it's in individual conversations or in the media, or especially as we hear from pro-choice organizations, you never find any discussion or even mention of the fact that something dies in an abortion. Yet the dictionary is pointing to this as the main definition of an abortion, right? It's pretty important, if this is what the dictionary is saying, for us as a nation, for us as individuals, to consider what this means in the ethical conversation about abortion. So it's impossible for us with this then to avoid the fact that something dies in an abortion. Now, this may sound like a dumb question, right? But what can die? Now, you can't respond to me right now, but only living things can die. So the dictionary has told us, number one, that something dies in an abortion. And by way of doing that, it tells us that something was alive because, again, only something that is living can die. And so, therefore, the dictionary has told us that something is alive before an abortion happens, right? Again, only something that is living can die. So it seems to me that the dictionary has helped us answer kind of that age-old question that everyone wants to ask, right? Which is, when does life begin? Now, the dictionary hasn't given us the exact point of when life begins, but the dictionary is presupposing that life already has begun before the abortion even came to be, right? Before the induced abortion even came to that situation, something was alive because therefore it died in the situation. Now, what does the dictionary tell us? What dies? What is the dictionary referring to? So the dictionary says that it is the embryo or the fetus that dies. Those are the two words that the dictionary uses. Again, the termination of a pregnancy resulting in the death of the embryo or fetus. Again, not my words, but the dictionary's. So it uses the words embryo or fetus. So what I did is say, well, what does the dictionary have to say about embryo, and what does it have to say about the word fetus? So let's get started with embryo, right? The dictionary says, search it, find it, that the embryo is defined as the developing human individual from the time of implantation to the end of the 8th week after conception. Let's read that again. The developing human individual from the time of implantation to the end of the 8th week after conception. So, of course, let's just think about this for a second. Implantation would be where that newly formed human being implants into the uterine lining of the woman's uterus, right? So that's what implantation is. That usually happens anywhere from 7 to 14 days after conception, which occurs in the fallopian tube, right? So the zygote and then the embryo implants into the uterine lining. All the way up to the 8th week after conception is the time when that unborn human is defined as an embryo. Now, key words there, developing human individual. We'll come back to that in 1 second. All right, search on M-W, Merriam-Webster, let's search fetus and see what that says. Fetus in the dictionary is defined as a developing human. Again, that word developing is used again. Human is used again. A developing human from usually 2 months after conception all the way up till birth, right? So you have embryo and then fetus. Now, it's interesting that the word fetus comes from a Latin word that means young one, right? it's important to remember that when we use the words embryo and fetus, they're not really value judgment words, right? It's a term to identify a stage of human development, right? Think of it as human embryo, human fetus, human infant, human toddler, human teenager, human adult, so on and so forth, right? These are all stages in human development, but they don't necessarily say that one human is valuable and one is not valuable, right? They're just identifying a time frame, right? Unfortunately, the word fetus has become used in society as almost a way to devalue the unborn child, right? Oh, well, it's just a fetus, right? It's not a person, it's just a fetus. You hear that often. But we got to remember that the dictionary is saying that this is a developing human, right? Now, one word that in the definition of embryo we cannot overlook, and almost wants me to say, wow, Merriam-Webster is pretty bold in what they're saying, because in the definition of embryo, they say that it's a developing human individual. Individual. Man, that's pretty bold, I think, for the dictionary to come out and say that it's a human individual. So not only is the dictionary saying that the unborn, what dies in an abortion, is human, not only are they saying that the unborn is living, which we've already talked about, but they're also saying that the embryo, that which dies in the abortion, is an individual, which means it has an identity that's distinct from anything else, including the body of the mother. That's where the unborn child, that's where that embryo is living at that time. But it doesn't mean in any way that it's taking away value, right? Because it's an individual that happens to be living in that place, right? So we have a human that's living, and that's an individual. And now it keeps using the word developing, right? Developing. Well, that word's not a problem to me, right? Aren't we all developing during our whole life, right? I mean, it's almost miraculous, the development of that embryo through the stage of being a fetus up until birth, right? Especially that first 8 weeks of the embryo, the development of the human, it's awesome, right? And I know during other videos on our Louisiana Right to Life channels, we talked a lot about fetal development and just kind of the awesome scientific way in which the human develops, right? But also think about the development of the infant, right? From birth to maybe 2 or 3 years of age, right? Just keep putting in your mind that image of the infant that's newly born and that 2 or 3-year-old that's beginning to, or maybe 4-year-old or even, that's beginning to learn their letters, beginning to talk, of course earlier than that, right? Beginning to do all sorts of activities, right? The development of that infant to 2-year-old is awesome, right? Now, we don't think somehow that because that human individual is developing at that point that it takes away their value in any way, right? No, we're all developing at some point in our life. Some of us may feel that we're developing the opposite direction as we get a little older sometimes, but that doesn't mean our value changes, right? And so that's the same thing, that the dictionary is talking about the developing human individual that is developing, which is not a problem, right? So guys, the dictionary is clear. Abortion results in the death of a human individual who is developing. But look, before you go out, if any of you are pro-choice advocates, before you go out and boycott Merriam-Webster as being some sort of closet pro-life business out there, that the dictionary is flawed and everything like that, consider for a second that this information, this definition, is built on some basic science, right? It's not built on any religion. It's not built on any Christian belief. This is just straight up science to be considered. We've again talked about this in other Louisiana Right to Life videos that we've released, but it's basic science, right? Again, all medical school embryology textbooks say that at the moment of conception is when the new human individual begins. That's when that person's life begins, right? That's how all of us began with our life, at that new stage of conception, right? And from that moment, we were distinct from our mother. This quote, again, I've said it before, I love this quote. It's from embryologist Ward Kisher out of the University of Arizona. He says that every human embryologist, everyone in the world, knows that the life of a new individual human being begins at fertilization, or we say conception. It is not belief. It is scientific fact. The dictionary is not depending on religious belief. The dictionary is not being written by some sort of pro-life advocate, right? It's basing things on fundamental science, right? That life begins at conception, that the human embryo is a member of the human family. He or she has human DNA. And from that, so therefore, abortion, which brings about the death of an individual, brings about the death of a human individual. So the dictionary, to me, is laying some basic science that often gets overlooked or even ignored in this conversation about abortion, right? Basic science that gets ignored. So the dictionary lays the groundwork for our conversation and for a national conversation about the ethical nature of abortion, right? Think about it this way. So I have 4 beautiful daughters, and they're all sweet and precious, and so I can never really imagine them saying this. So let's imagine I had a son, right? So I'm sitting, I'm washing dishes, right, at my kitchen sink, and I'm just focused on washing the dishes. I can't see what's happening behind me. But let's say somebody, a son or a boy, comes in, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, can I kill this?" Again, he comes in, my back, I can't see what he's doing, I can't see what's in his hands. He says, "Hey, Dad, can I kill this?" What do y'all think my response should be to that question? No? Or yes? No, neither response helps us in this situation, right? What I need to say is, well, what is it? Because, if it's a roach, sure, go ahead, right? If it's the neighbor's cat, well, we got a conversation. If it's his sister, we got big problems here, right? See, the thing is when we're deciding whether it's moral or ethical to kill something or not, the first thing we have to ask is, what is it, right? Our answer of whether it's moral to kill something depends on that question of what it is, right? We assign different values as humans to various things. Obviously, the mosquito we're going to assign a different value to the mosquito than to a 5-year-old child, right? Or even to the neighbor's cat. But to the 5-year-old child especially, we're going to set up a different standard of value between the mosquito or the roach and the 5-year-old, the 2-year-old, or even that infant that was born yesterday, right? That infant has a value that we're going to protect because of our shared humanity, right? We're all in this together as human beings, right? And if we sacrifice one person's life for a not very good reason, then we are putting all of our lives in jeopardy. But what is the only thing that is consistent through all of us? And that's our human DNA, right? That's what defines who we are, that we are human beings and that we're part of the human family. And so therefore in society, we must agree that human family, the human being, is kind of the starting point of our conversation, right? So we must know before we decide whether it's ethical to kill something, we got to decide what it is, right? We got to find that out. Well, when we're talking about induced abortion, everybody, the dictionary has already done that job for us. It has defined what dies as an individual human being who is developing. And that's a fact that we all need to grapple with and keep in mind. So for those of you who may be listening or watching today who support abortion, whether you do it reluctantly, whether you do it vigorously, whether you support all abortions, or even if you just support a few abortions in various cases, you have to keep in mind that if you're intellectually honest, every abortion results in the ending of a human individual's life. Now, we haven't really talked about whether it's ethical or not to do that. Of course, my decision is pretty clear. Where I stand is pretty clear. But what I want to encourage you to think about is that even if you're going to support abortion, then you need to walk into that support. You need to walk into making your case for why abortion is okay or whether it's moral or not. You have to make that case knowing and understanding and coming to grips with the fact that your justification, just as the dictionary tells us, permits the life of an individual human being to come to an end in a very induced manner through induced abortion. So that's what the dictionary tells us about abortion, that the unborn that dies in an abortion, that something dies in an abortion, that something was living before that something died, that thing, that it that dies is an individual human being who is developing. And we need to come to grips with that before we can even begin talking about abortion. So that's the ground rules, that's the justification, that's the playing field that's laid forth by the dictionary, and now we have to talk further beyond that. So in my next video, what I'm going to talk about from there is how we have to be consistent in talking about abortion and its impact. And as pro-life advocates, we have to challenge people compassionately and in a friendly way to be consistent in their defense of both the born child and the unborn child. Thanks for watching. Again, feel free to make comments below. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.